Learning the Qur'an because it gives us the constitution by which we live our lives. And then once Allah has blessed us to learn the Qur'an, then what do? We give back.
Ramadan, 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 Ramadan.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. The first hadith that we have here, and also we're going to cover the 24th hadith because they're of a similar nature, is narrated by Uthman radiallahu anhu. Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, he says, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. He narrates that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the best of you are those who learn the Qur'an and those who teach the Qur'an. And in another hadith that's narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, أشراف أمتي حملة القرآن وأصحاب الليل. That the nobility of my ummah are those that carry the Qur'an with them, meaning they embody the Qur'an, they learn and teach the Qur'an, and as well as those people that stand up at night and they worship Allah Azza wa Jal. The second hadith is of a very weak nature. However, the first hadith is strong, and this is something that the scholars have spoken about at great length. There is so much to be mentioned here. First and foremost, who are we talking about that is narrating this hadith? This hadith is being narrated by Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, Uthman al-Ghani, we know so much about him. He was one of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's most beloved companions, Dhun Nurayn. He married two of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughters. He was the third Khalifa of Islam. He helped to expand Islam to reaches that it had never seen before. He was one of the nobility of Quraysh. He was close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. He had all of this honor with him, but he's narrating what? Khairukum, the best of you. Imagine, this is one of the best of the people that has ever lived on the face of this earth after the Anbiya, after the Prophets, and he is narrating that truly the best of you are whom? Those who learn the Qur'an and those who teach it. And perhaps it is for this reason that Uthman radiallahu anh, he also acted upon this hadith, and Allah blessed him to be from those who protected the Qur'an, who learned the Qur'an and who taught the Qur'an and who helped preserve the Qur'an for generations and generations. Certainly it is Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anh, upon whose mushaf we read and we recite from today. Originally it was his manuscript that was preserved and that was spread, the Uthmani Rasm, the Uthmani mushaf. Subhanallah. Now, what is the hadith teaching us? The best of you are those who are the best in learning the Qur'an and teaching the Qur'an. This has such a great value. Why? Because as Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Qur'an, Khalaqa al-Insan. When Allah Azza wa Jal, He speaks about being the most merciful, the first thing that He mentions as an embodiment of His mercy is not that He created people. That's the second thing that He mentions. Rather, the first thing that He mentions is that He taught the Qur'an. He taught the Qur'an, Allama al-Qur'an. This is the greatest embodiment of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. Why? Because without the Qur'an in our lives, without this dustur, this constitution, our life itself is meaningless. It's meaningless, it's devoid of purpose. What is our purpose? Allah created us for what reason? What reason did Allah Azza wa Jal, He created us? What is the reason for which Allah Azza wa Jal created us? Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in the Qur'an, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We have not created humankind and jinn except that they worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, how do we worship Allah Azza wa Jal? It is the Qur'an that teaches us how to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, and it is the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam which explains the Qur'an as well, that teaches us how to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. This is what gives our life its purpose and meaning. This is the reason for which we were created, and it is intimately tied with the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Devoid of the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, we do not live purposeful lives. We do not live lives that have much meaning in it whatsoever. In fact, as Allah Azza wa Jal, He describes the disbelievers, what does He say about them? Hum kal an'am, ulaika kal an'ami bal hum adal. Certainly they are like cattle. They are like cattle. Rather, they are even more astray. Why is that? Because the purpose of cattle is to graze, it's to eat, it's to reproduce, it is to serve as meat for the people, it is to serve as the beautification of the earth. It is for all of these purposes, but it is not for the purpose of serving Allah Azza wa Jal through devout obedience in salah and zakat and siyam and psalm, and earning as a result of that the reward of Jannah. That is not their purpose. And if we as humans don't actually serve Allah Azza wa Jal in the purpose that we were meant to serve Him with, then we are no different than the animals. And rather, as Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, we are even more astray because the animals in eating and drinking and reproducing, they serve their purpose. Allah created them for that reason. But if human beings are restricted and limited to doing that and nothing more, then certainly we do not serve the purpose for which Allah created us. We are even more misguided than those creations of Allah Azza wa Jal. The best thing that we can do is to serve Allah Azza wa Jal, and the best way we can do that is by learning the Qur'an, because it gives us the constitution by which we live our lives. And then once Allah has blessed us to learn the Qur'an, then what do? We give back, because this is not a religion that hides. This is not a religion that restricts it to ourselves. The mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, the rahmah of Allah Azza wa Jal, wasi'at kulla shay. It expands over everything. In fact, one of the Bedouins came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he started to urinate in the masjid, and all of the Sahaba, they got upset, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam let him finish, and then he taught him that this is not what we do. This is a sacred place. This is a noble place. This is not what we do. This is not what we do in this place. And when the Arabi, when the Bedouin, he heard the Prophet ﷺ and he received this guidance from the Prophet ﷺ, he was so elated, he was so jubilant, he was so happy, he fell in love with the Prophet ﷺ so much, he said to Allah, making dua that, Ya Allah, have mercy on me and the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ reminded him, certainly the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal expands and extends over everyone. May Allah have mercy on all of us if we want to explain and we want to expand the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal to our children, to our youth, to those in our community, and to the non-Muslims that live around us. Then it is imperative that we learn the Qur'an for ourselves first and foremost, and then we also teach it to those that are around us. وجزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Ramadan, 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 Ramadan.